Hello everyone, it's me again. Welcome back to the Soul Crushing Experience. For those of you who don't know, this is a series I do where I go through my day-by-day progress on a Soul Crushing tower and go over my experience, enjoyment, and other things. This time we head to the end of my Zone 1 journey to see the only tower I have left in Zone 1, the Tower of Thinning Layers. This claustrophobic tower gets thinner and thinner every floor and is primarily wrap-based gameplay, with a couple trust jumps every now and then, and is completely purist. Without further ado, let's get into it. I started the day by beating Citadel of Peril, since I wanted to do that before I did Toddle. That way, my last Zone 1 tower would be the Tower of Thinning Layers. I began with a simple practice run, just doing every single jump in the tower. I found the tower surprisingly easy for me while doing this practice run though. I was most worried about floors 5 to 9, specifically the walkarounds on 5, the low jumps on 8, and the high jumps on 9. The final stretch was not too hard, but I could see it being much harder when trying to do it with nerves as well. After the practice run, I began working my way down to do every floor in one go. After a bit, I did 10 in one go. The most concerning thing for me about 10 was that I would be nervous. The jumps aren't exactly too hard, but I could see it being a huge problem with nerves. Then it was time for 9. 9 was a pretty weird floor that had an unclimbable 12 stud near the beginning of it, and then there were a bunch of high jumps after that aren't that hard, but really easy to slip up on. 8 starts out with a low jump section. This is one of the hardest parts in the tower. They are very tight wraps with very low ceilings. They are completely muscle memory to get the hang of. The rest of 8 has some ramps, but nothing that is too difficult. 7 has a lot of trusses. Nothing on 7 is too hard, but I could see it being pretty easy to choke up. Then, floor 6 starts off with this wrap circle. Some of these wraps are pretty tight and easy to fail. Not much more to say about 6 though, mainly just that wrap circle. Then, floor 5 starts with some walkarounds that are pretty scary to do. There are 8 of them in a row and 2 different types. Although it isn't exactly hard, it can mess you up after doing them for so long back to back. The rest of 5 isn't too hard though. Then it was on to 4. This floor is actually pretty easy to do. It has these wedge ladders to climb up and go between, these jumps where you grab the ledge to jump, a wall hop, then some pretty easy wraps to end off the floor. Then there is floor 3. It's a very cramped wrap floor, but isn't anything too difficult. Definitely can be failed though if you aren't careful. 2 consists of a bunch of stick-out wraps that you should take your time on. They aren't exactly hard, but rushing them can make them pretty difficult. Then the first floor. It is actually pretty similar to floor 2, but less stick-outs and more just wraps. So within the first day, I got to play from the beginning, which doesn't normally happen when I play Soul Crushing. My first attempt at floor 2, I failed the wall hops getting onto the floor. After a bit, I got back to 2 and actually passed the wall hops. Then I got to 3, then 4, then 5. And somehow, I then passed 5 as well. I was really confused on what was happening, but I wasn't going to complain. I then got past 6, getting to 7 on my first floor 3 attempt. Unfortunately, I failed the first jump of 7 because I couldn't grab the ledge and it pushed me off. I caught myself on 4, then fell off of 4 down to 3, and got back up to 4. You're gonna hear this happen a lot in the video, since 3 has a pretty big platform to catch yourself on. I turned on the beginning of 4 and pushed myself to the bottom after a bit of the 3 net, then went to practice the jump on 7 that I had failed. I learned to do it from the front rather than the side. After a lot of failing 1 and 2, I got myself back onto the platform on 3. And not too long after that happened, I got back up to 5. To my surprise, I passed the walkarounds again, meaning that I could get pretty far if I was careful. I got up to 6, and then didn't get my jump off, falling back to the platform on 3. I then failed to jump on 4, falling down to 1 again. Then I ended my stream. I was originally hoping to finish just a couple floors in one run today, and instead I got to floor 7 from the beginning, which is completely insane for me. So with a great day of progress, I got back to Toddle the next day. After a long day of driving to see the solar eclipse, I got on to play Toddle for day 2. I started with a practice run just to make sure I could practice any jumps that I struggled with. Nothing too crazy happened this practice run, although I did get 9 to the win pad, which was a pretty alright run. Then I hopped into playing from the beginning. After a couple minutes, I was up onto the platform on 3 for the 3rd time. Then I failed the walkarounds on 5 for the first time. This was shocking to me, but mainly because it took me this long to fail them. I got to 5 again, and then passed the walkarounds. I actually passed the rest of 5, meaning I was back to 6. However, I bounced off the wall trying to land on the thin stud, bringing me back down to the beginning of 5, where I then fail a walkaround, meaning I was back to the platform on 3. Unfortunately, I failed the long wrap on 5, bringing me to the beginning of 3, which is below the net, and then I fell before I was able to get back up there. Then I was back up to the 3 net after taking the sword off of my avatar. I got back to 6 and got bounced off the wall by the second thin stud this time. Back to the beginning of 5 for another round of walkarounds. I passed them again though. Then I failed 5 because of my terrible strat for doing a jump, which I changed after this day. I failed the walkarounds on 5 after that yet again, catching myself back on the beginning of the net. And unfortunately, I then fell at the first jump of 4, bringing me back down to 1 for the start of a new run. After changing my avatar back to the troll face for a bit, I then made it back to 5. I had a pretty bad fail though, not going up far enough on the wrap to land on the half stud. Shortly after this, I fell to the beginning yet again. This was unfortunately the last run to 5 I had today, and I ended the stream. I was not able to get a new PB today, but I was getting more consistent, and was hoping to get to the final stretch tomorrow. I started today off after I did some off-screen practicing. Nothing much, just tried getting more consistent on some floors. Not very long into the grind, and I already got to the net on 3. I then got to 5 and failed very quickly to the wraparounds. Despite this, I felt pretty good since this was the quickest I had ever gotten to 5. Unfortunately, I fell off the net shortly after failing the walkarounds, meaning I was back to 1. I was back up to the net, and then got back to 5 again. I then failed the walkarounds again. Next 5 attempt, and I actually passed the walkarounds this time. But unfortunately, I accidentally jumped off 5 because I got into a climbing animation. Then, it was time for 6. I passed the thin studs, meaning this was the farthest I had gotten since the big fluke. Unfortunately, on one of the cylinder wraps at the end of 6, I didn't manage to squeeze between the 2 studs and fell down. I then proceeded to fail the long wrap on 5 and fell to the beginning again. After a bit, I then got back up to the net yet again. Although, I never got past 4 this net run before I was back down to the very beginning again. Not too long after though, and I was back to the net for yet another run. This was finally the run, where I ended up getting a new PB. 7 wasn't really that hard, but there were a few jumps I was worried about failing. Unfortunately, I did fail the last wrap of 7, but did barely catch myself at the end of 6. Then, I made it up to 8, after nearly walking off the last jump. It's unfortunate that I failed the first low ceiling jump of the section since it's the easier of the bunch, but I can't say I'm too surprised. Not too long after, and I ended up below the net again. Next run and I was back up, and I got past the walkarounds on 5 too. But yet again, I got bounced off the wall before landing on the thin stud, and also failed the walkarounds on 5. Then I fell below the net. Once again, not long until I reached the net yet again. I was starting to feel the consistency on the earlier floors of Toddle now. I got to 6 again, and this time I finally developed a new strategy for the thin studs, and that allowed me to pass them. Then I managed to get to 7 again. I ended up passing 7, meaning I was about to do the low jump section again. And somehow... No way. No fucking way. So, I fluked the rest of the jumps. I unfortunately jumped too early on this low ceiling jump. Unfortunately, that was the last good run of my net run, and I fell back to 1. I practiced 8 again, and a bit of 9 too, just to make sure I was consistent when I got there, then went back to playing from the beginning. My next net run was going pretty well. I'd managed to get to 6 again. Although, I failed the cylinder wrap again, missing the 1 stud. My next 6 run got to 7, and that run got to 8 as well. Somehow, I passed the low ceiling jumps again, and approached my PB. I managed to pass it, but then failed to land on the half stud afterwards. This was a really sad fail too, but I caught myself at the end of 6. I actually managed to get back there and pass the half stud. After that was some really far stickouts, jumping onto a thin stud, and then it was time for 9. I was going really slow as to make sure I didn't fail. I passed the 12 stud jump, and then began the scariest part of 9, the high jumps. As I said before, these aren't too difficult, but super easy to mess up. I managed to pass them all, and then... I'm scared! No! Oh my god, I'm so stupid! Oh my god! This is one of the worst fails I have had in the game. I got so worried about 10 that I forgot to treat the jump like a head hitter, so I ended up climbing onto the platform and then I jumped off. I caught myself pretty high, so I wasn't too worried. I started loop failing 6 to 8, until eventually I got back up to 9. I was hoping I could pass it again and get my first 10 attempt for real this time. I walked off one of the high jumps, but caught myself. But then, I failed one of them, fell into near the end of 6. I then fell all the way to the bottom, meaning I had to start a new run. This was one of the most crazy runs I had, and one of the saddest fails I've ever had in JTOW. I was more motivated than ever by it though, and was ready to beat the tower. It took a few net runs, but eventually I was back on 9. I was a lot more nervous this time around, since I knew it could be my first 10 run. But unfortunately, I failed the 12 stud jump. I wasn't too shocked, since it's still a 12 stud jump. Luckily, I got myself back up to 9, but accidentally jumped to the beginning of 8, where I lost my run. After this, I practiced 9 again, just to help me with my high jump consistency. The next attempt, I failed the low ceiling again, and lost my net run after that. Then, it was the next 9 attempt. Unfortunately, I failed the 12 stud jump because of jumping too early, and was back down to 8 after the low ceiling section, where I then got myself back up to 9 right after. This time, I passed the 12 stud jump. Although, the high jumps after got me, and then I was back down to 7. Then it was another 8 low ceiling fail, back down to 4. A couple more 5 fails later, and it was back off the net I went. Another bit of practicing 9 after, and then I ended stream. Or at least, I was about to. Someone in my chat was grinding Toif, and managed to get to the roof, so I decided to do one last attempt while waiting for him to beat it. He ended up doing so. I got to the net this run, then 5, then 6, then 7, then to 6, then fell to the net again, so I started going back up. 5, then 6, then 7 again, then to 8, where I failed the low ceiling section down to 4. Then back up I went yet again. I got back up to 8, then past the low ceiling section, and before I knew it, it was back to floor 9. After all of this, I was praying to pass floor 9 again. I took the high jump slower than usual, as I really did not want to fail this time. And sure enough, I almost fell off the last one, but managed to get on. This round goes out to Saint. He's the only reason I didn't give up yet. Saint beating Toif managed to get me to my first floor 10 run. I was a bit nervous, but I was less nervous than I thought. This was probably because I had full expectations to fail it. So as I walked around the corner and onto the thin stud, I began doing the final stretch. First came the wide stickouts, which I passed. Then the jump around the pole, which I passed. The 10 stud wrap was next, which I passed. Then it was the hardest jump, which was around this really big pillar, which I somehow passed. This is when my nerves got really high, and I was extremely scared. I started shaking. Was I really gonna fluke the entire outside like this? I had approached the last few jumps, then the last jump, and managed to land on the roof. This was it. I just had to touch the small wind pad. Yes! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, my heart. Oh, my heart. Oh my god. The fastest I had completed any soul-crushing tower, and it was the new hardest too. This tower was not as bad as I thought it was going to be, since I heard some pretty not great things about it. Turns out it was just okay. Nothing great, but I still had an alright time with it. I was right about the second half of the tower being the hardest, since I was constantly loop failing the last few floors. And despite me fluking 10, I still think it was a lot harder with nerves, especially near the end. Well, without further ado, let's start the rankings. When rating a tower, I rate a tower out of two categories, gameplay and enjoyment. We'll start with the gameplay. The tower is completely purist and has a high focus on wraps, similarly to Tower of Double Trouble. In fact, you can really see how Toddle influenced TOTT as well. But anyway, the gameplay was just okay. It really wasn't that special. It was mostly wraps, some ladder and trusses here and there, but pretty bland overall. But not bad, however. Which is why I am giving the gameplay a 6 out of 10. Then, the enjoyment. I had an okay time with this tower. After I failed 9 the first time in the stupidest way, every fail to 9 hurt more and more. And I felt like I was getting unlucky, even though I really wasn't. But nonetheless, it still made me have the worst time with this tower. The end of this grind was frustrating for sure, but I still didn't have a terrible time with the tower. So therefore, I am giving the enjoyment a 5 out of 10, giving Tower of Thinning Layers an 11 out of 20 overall, which is just above average. Thank you all so much for watching, as usual. If you were watching my streams, you know exactly why this tower was so special to me. I recently had been streaming completing every Zone 1 tower in order of difficulty, and had the climactic finish of Toddle. The Zone 1 streams were by far the most fun I've ever had in this game, despite most of the towers being not good. Doing the final spinning maze of Tower of Zizplas after having the most miserable time I've ever had in the game, the Citadel of Peril making me more nervous than I've ever been, and then finally Tower of Thinning Layers being my new hardest, and the final hardest insane I will be doing, because after this is the start of the preparations for my final push to Extreme. Next is Tower of Inevitable Failure, and then my first Extreme Tower, Tower of Bloodthirsty Kinos. So if you want to see me play live, you can do so on my YouTube, which is this channel, or if you prefer Twitch, I stream there too at the same time. You can find the link to my Twitch in the description below, as well as the link to my Discord, to keep up to date on my videos and streams, and talk to others who play JTO as well. Thank you all again, and I will see you all next time.